the Jesus myth. A pilgrimage to the most controversial places on earth. Investigating ancient stories of Jesus, separating the myth from the truth, and discovering what it means for you today. The third season of Real Encounters with God. All new, on location, in Israel. New places, new people, new encounters. Real Encounters with God, the Jesus myth. Still at home. My name is Brian Tome, pastor of Crossroads Church. Before we get to Israel, I want to let you know we're doing something a little different. We're experimenting. We're trying to do things shorter because I think our attention spans are a bit different when we're doing things digitally. We'll still have worship and all kind of stuff that's going to be helpful today. We're going to try something that's a little bit shorter. You know, there's a myth that persists, and that is when Jesus comes into your life, life gets easier. It doesn't necessarily. Just because God is in your life doesn't mean everything is sugar plums and unicorns and all that kind of stuff. Well, interestingly enough, though, in the first early days after Jesus' resurrections, things were looking great for the disciples. There was a kind of glow around them, and then everything hits the fan. That's what we're going to look at today on this episode of Real Encounters. We're going to start at the Damascus Gate in Jerusalem, one of the most tense places in the entire region. When you hear of violence happening, very frequently, it happens right here. I'm outside of the holy city of Jerusalem, specifically right outside Damascus Gate, one of the entrances into the old city of Jerusalem. And this place is alive. It's bustling. All different kinds of people here. It's the way it actually was at Jesus' time. Where there was a gate, there was activity. People were there hanging, especially right after the resurrection, which is what we celebrated at Easter. It would have been buzzing, man. People are hearing this crazy news. If somebody came back from the dead first somebody died who we all respected, who was a miracle worker, then he came back from the dead. People are blown away. I know it sounds crazy for you and I to believe that Jesus actually came back from the dead, but I want you to imagine what would happen if people you knew saw him, if people you knew told you that he had actually come back from the dead. This is actually what's happening in the moments after the resurrection of Christ. In the book of Acts, chapter 6, verse 7 to 8, it says this: Then the word of God spread, and the number of the disciples multiplied greatly in Jerusalem, and a great many of the priests were obedient to the faith. And Stephen, full of faith and power, did great wonders and signs among the people. So priests believe. People who days earlier may have been opposed to him, they might have actually seen him come back from the dead, or they knew somebody who did. I mean, just think about yourself. What if your neighbor, somebody you respected, or somebody who does your taxes, or an attorney friend, or your kid's school teacher said, I saw this guy, Jesus, he came back from the dead. I'm telling you, I saw it. You'd probably go, okay, maybe not crazy. Maybe there's something here. There was power taking place. Crazy things were happening. Healings were happening. The city was abuzz. In the midst of that buzz, there's one guy who was especially bold. His name was Stephen. Stephen was declaring that Jesus is the Messiah. He's the answer to their problems. He's the key to eternity. And not everybody likes this. People are actually a bit upset with him, and they actually drag him outside the city, outside of a gate that might have not looked too much like this, into where all the people were, and they stone him. We're talking about blood. We're talking about rocks hitting you in the jaw, breaking your jaw, knocking you out. Can't imagine what it would look like or feel like to have people gathering and pelting you. And when that would happen, everyone would come around because it was causing a scene. Let's actually read what took place in the book of Acts. Then they cried out with a loud voice, stopped their ears, and ran at him with one accord. And they cast him out of the city and stoned him. And the witnesses laid down their clothes at the feet of a young man named Saul. and they stoned Stephen as he was calling on God and saying, "Lord Jesus, receive my spirit." Then he knelt down and cried out with a loud voice, "Lord, do not charge them with this sin." And when he had said this, he fell asleep. So the people who don't believe, don't like what Jesus is saying, they stop up their ears and they run at him. They run at him and they stone him. While they are stoning him, his response is unbelievable. Before I tell you more about his response, I don't know if you felt this way or not. Very few of us have ever gotten rocks hurled at us. I hope not anyway. But all of us have felt this tension that Stephen is in. Easter just happened. Isn't Easter supposed to be happy? Whoo, happy, happy Easter. I love Easter. Wonderful, 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 wonderful. It is wonderful, but it doesn't last very long. The power is out. Unexplainable things are happening. People's lives are changing, but it's not all downhill. These are tough, tough times. You might feel that way. You might have received Christ, and you might have had the impression that, well, that just means my life is going to be easy now. That just means that whenever I pray for something, it's going to happen. That just means that I'm immune to normal difficulties, right? No. To be clear, when difficulties come, when you have Christ, you have a peace that passes understanding. There is a strength you can tap into. And also, to be clear, I believe I have less problems in my life because I think that God is shielding me from things that I wouldn't have been shielded from before. Maybe I'm making better choices as well. I think my life is better, but I want to be really clear. I have a lot of problems, and so do all of us do. I filmed most of this back in February, so when I was talking about us all having problems, I had no idea what was coming over the past few months, but it's even more important right now. Easter, the joy of Easter eventually wears off and we're left with problems. We have a guy on our crew right now, after we're done with the shoot, we're taking him to the airport because he just got word that his child, his first child, has been miscarried. And his wife is at home alone. It's supposed to be their first child. It was supposed to be their first child. That shouldn't happen to Derek and his wife. That shouldn't happen. Jesus should protect them from that, especially if he's in Israel filming and trying to push forward the agenda of God, but yet he's not immune. None of us are immune to medical diagnoses that go bad. None of us are immune to our neighbors not liking us. None of us are immune to being laid off or having too much work on our plate or being right-sized or not being able to have a child or having a divorce or whatever it is. Problems are real and they're with us. The question is, how will you be in the middle of the problem? Stephen has a problem. He's getting stoned and he drops to his knees. He drops to his knees and he's not going to recant his faith. In fact, he doesn't just not recant his faith. While he's on his knees being pelted, he asks God to forgive people who are stoning him. Who does that? What kind of person does that? I'll tell you what kind of person does that. A person who understands power. That's the kind of person who does that. And he's not the only one. He's the very first martyr, Stephen is. All of the early disciples were martyred. Every last one, except for one, John. John has it real good. He dies isolated on the island of Patmos. Okay, quick fact check. John was exiled to the island of Patmos where he wrote the book of Revelation, but then he actually died in Ephesus. I've seen his tomb. Sorry guys, I can't bat 1,000. Believer after believer after believer gets persecuted, believer after believer after believer meets murder, believer after believer has difficulty, and yet they power through it. Why do they power through it? They power through it because there's something different inside of them. There's something different that God is doing in and through them. We cannot promise you that your life is going to be easy. It will not be easy. I can tell you that God will be near, and I can tell you there is a power that's available to you that transcends your problems. That's what we're investigating today. There's a classic misconception that if God's involved in your life, you will not have pain. The truth is that you and I will have pain, but that God can be present in the midst of our pain. My friend Kyle caught up with a couple in our Lexington community that has that very story to tell.
Hey, we're in Lexington, Kentucky with the Sharps. This is Jeremy, Katie, and Braden, here to hear your story about what God's been doing in your lives over the last few months.
So I had a great pregnancy, no complications or anything. Braden was born and he was having some GI issues. He has a rare genetic condition.
His body isn't able to take in a full day's worth of food on its own. In that state, he can't grow on his own without some additional help. And the other big part of it is he has profound hearing loss, so he's deaf in both ears.
And so we were at UK NICU for 3 weeks. He was just not doing well, just losing weight.
They ended up doing one test, and basically after that one test, they're like, hey, we kind of capped out our capabilities here at UK. The best thing we can do now is send you up to Cincinnati Children's where they have, sub specialists for everything. It was right before Christmas and, flu season has been crazy. So there were no beds available at Cincinnati Children's. My kind of low point was about 2 or 3 in the morning, a week and a half in to just waiting, not knowing when we're going to get a room up at Cincinnati. Katie was holding him. He was screaming. I'm sitting in bed, so angry, what are we doing here? Why is this happening to us? This is ridiculous. And it's one of those times, people say God speaks, but for me, it was this feeling I couldn't get out, you need to wake up now, and you need to get up, and you need to get up and hold Braden. I just held him, and I said, God, if you're here, you don't need to heal him. I just want to know you're in the room. Next thing you know, Katie's like, Jeremy, look at Braden. And I was like, what? He was just screaming, and he just completely stopped, and he just smiled at me. And that was the moment for me when it was like, hey, I got you, and you have to rely on me.
What's happened since then? Did you go to Cincinnati?
Yeah, so we ended up being in Cincinnati for a month, where they have more GI specialists. We finally got him to a place where he could gain weight at home. And so that was quite a big transition with all this new hardware on him and all these new things that we have to do at home to just make sure that he can grow.
I feel like in nearly everyone's life, when you follow Jesus, you hit this moment where you go, I kind of thought that having you in my life, God, would make more things just perfect. I get to avoid some of just the crap and the problems and then you don't. How do you get to a place of hope and God? Where are you now with that?
For me, I could just think of countless doctors standing in front of me, just shaking their head and not having any answers for us. I feel like those days hope is really hard, but we're home with Braden and we're here, so that gives me hope.
And I think one of the big things we've learned is sometimes there's just not a shortcut. And sometimes you just have to go through the trial. We've run ourselves empty, and that's when the presence of God has actually been able to show up in our lives because, we've done everything we know how to do within our own capability, and it's not enough. It's not going to fix Braden. You don't know what you're going to get in the future, and so there's no way that we can shoulder the weight of what could potentially happen for Braden in the future. And so it's forced us to just be here and just hang out with him in the moment and just enjoy being with him right now, which is the first time I've ever been able to do that.
Powerful. You do not have to go through struggles alone, just like Jeremy and Katie haven't gone through their struggle alone. We want to be with you. You can go to crossroads.net and we will chat with you and pray for you right now with whatever you're dealing with. Hey, I hope you're getting some clarity and some hope through this episode. If you are and you want to spread some clarity and hope to your friends and neighbors and partner with us financially, you can text Crossroads to 313131. Text Crossroads to 313131. As we've seen, the classic misconception of if there is pain, God must not be real. That classic misconception is utterly wrong and utterly unhealthy. We've seen that in Jeremy and Katie's story. But there's another critical thing, not just that God is with us and can be with us in our pain, but that the story will ultimately end well. In the book of Isaiah, there's a prophecy that's written 2,700 years ago that has relevance for our life today. Isaiah 35, 1-2. Even the wilderness and desert will be glad in those days. The wasteland will rejoice and blossom with spring crocuses. Yes, there will be an abundance of flowers and singing and joy. The deserts will become as green as the mountains of Lebanon, as lovely as Mount Carmel or the plain of Sharon. There the Lord will display His glory, the splendor of our God. Let's go back to Israel and see firsthand a Bible prophecy that has come true. To do this, we're going to be with my friend Suriel. He's a Bible scholar, an Israel tour guide, a hotel owner, a former Israeli Special Forces, an all-around really, really good dude. And before we do, I just want you to know that I know when we look at stuff in the Middle East, it is incredibly complex politically. And with all the different people groups there is significant pain to all different kinds of folks who are not Israelis there. I don't want to minimize that, but I do want us to see there's something special that God is doing in this modern day land that we know as Israel. So we're walking inside of a fulfilled prophecy right now.
Yes, we are. We are here at the Judean desert. It's one of those dry places in the land of Israel. You know, we have about 60% of the size of Israel is a dry area down in the south, the Negev. And when you look around, you see that many places would look like a desert.
Like this, a desert.
Yeah, this is how a desert's supposed to look like, right?
Yeah, I think Mark Twain said when he came and visited here that this wasn't fit for a camel.
Yeah, it's true. Mark Twain, it's a great book. He was here during the 19th century and he came to this so-called the land of the Bible, you know, and I don't know exactly what was his faith like from a Christian point of view.
He was not a Christian, his wife was.
Okay, he knew the Bible very well, and you see that he's disappointed. He thinks that he will see all those beautiful sights as it is described in the scriptures, and suddenly he comes and it's all dry and empty and thorns and bushes, and he's like, what is that? But you know, this is how the land of Israel was looking like for centuries. And now, you know, after the independence, 1948, things changed.
Yeah, we go from that and this to huge portions of your country being lush.
Yeah, look at that. You know, look at that. If I would tell any child, please draw me how a desert would look like, no one would have such a thing. It's all green. You see all those palm trees growing all over, dates and so on. It's because of a system, you know, that was developed, the irrigation system with drip. And you have the possibility now also to create life where you have death, basically desert.
Crazy, this was invented by you. I understand the drip irrigation, your Israeli people. It's really nuts that your country, which has such a difficult, rugged terrain, is the only country that is actually growing more trees than harvesting trees in the country right now, or excuse me, in the world. It's quite a stunning reversal.
Yeah, I would say that thank God for His grace, you know, and the fact that He blesses this region. This region can look as a desert. I mean, the potential is to be a desert, but with the grace of God, with the wisdom that He gave people, I believe so, this is now, you see that also dry area can flourish.
Prophecies being fulfilled, it's a real thing. The track record of the Bible is abundantly clear and proven. It said that a Messiah would come, and He's come. It said that the deserts would bloom, and they are blooming. This means no matter what crisis, no matter what tribulation, no matter what difficulty you're facing right now, there is a hope that's coming, a hope that's real. Romans 12:12 says that we should rejoice in hope, persevere in the midst of tribulation, and be constant in prayer. We can take hope that your story right now is not the end of the story.
door, singing, come near, come here, yeah. Sing that again. We've nowhere else to go, we've nowhere else to turn, so we're kneeling at your door, singing, come near, come here. We've nowhere else to go, we've nowhere else to turn, we're kneeling at your door, singing, come near, come here.
Come here, God. Come here. Come here. Come here financially. Come here spiritually. Come here emotionally. Come here relationally. Come here. Come here, God. You're God of the breakthrough. Come to us now.
Sing, we've nowhere else to go, we've nowhere else to turn, we're kneeling at your door, singing, come near, come here. We need your kingdom now, exchange it for our doubt. We're kneeling at your door, singing, come near, come here, come near, come here, God. Come near, God of the breakthrough, your promises stand true. You haven't failed us yet, no. You haven't failed us yet. Our miracle maker, our hope and our Savior. You haven't failed us yet, no. You haven't failed us yet. Shown us who you are. You've shown us who you are. Lord, you've etched it on our hearts. So we're crying out for more. We're singing, come near, come here. So pour your spirit down as our praises rising now. We're crying out for more. We're singing, come near, come here, come near. Come here, Lord, come near, God of the breakthrough. Your promises stand true. You haven't failed us yet, no. You haven't failed us yet. Our miracle maker, our hope and our Savior. You haven't failed us yet, no. You haven't failed us yet. We're gonna sing that verse again. I just, wherever you're at, if you're able to right now, I just want you to put both hands out in front of you. And one, I want you to look at your hands and realize they're empty. We hold nothing before him, and we ask him and set in motion our body to receive him, what he has for us. You've shown us who you are. You've etched it on our hearts. So we're crying out for more. We're singing, come near, come here. So pour your spirit down as our praise is rising now. We're crying out for more. We're singing, come near, Lord, come near, God, come near, God of the breakthrough. Your promises stand. Yes, they do. You haven't failed us yet. No, you haven't failed us yet. nowhere else to turn. So we're kneeling at your door, singing, come near, come here.
We're going to pick back up next week to hear about more prophecies being fulfilled. Crazy, crazy, crazy. I just want to remind you that if you want to be a giver, if you want to engage with us financially, just follow the instructions on the bottom of the screen. And I tell you, the reason we do that is we want to fund life change. We want to get our hands dirty at Crossroads, whether it's helping for childcare with medical workers, or we want to get our hands dirty by getting our hands clean. Yes, crazy, crazy, crazy. Some of the innovative, creative things are happening in our community. We're going to leave you with one of those examples right now.
Hey Crossroads, I'm Andy Ryder, community pastor of Crossroads Dayton. And throughout this whole crisis, we've been looking for ways as a community to step into the gap and to meet tangible, practical needs. And one of the ways that we've done that is by partnering with a local distillery called Still Wright's a fantastic local distillery, I will say, to create this. This is a much needed hand sanitizer, 5,000 bottles that we're helping to produce for Wright-Patterson Air Force Base, and another 1,000 to be given to retirement homes and first responders around our community. And it's just one of those things that makes me thankful for the creativity and just the generosity of people on this team. So I'm glad to be on this team with each of you to be doing creative stuff like this.
So thanks for being with us today. Let me just pray for you and pray for your week. God, I thank you that you've given us time to reorient ourselves spiritually, and I pray that that orientation remains all week long. Give us your hope, give us your perseverance, and we want to be with you all week long. Thank you. Amen.